Jenny Millers was 29 years old and lived in a city where clocks seemed to run slower and silences lasted longer than conversations. She lived alone in a modest apartment above the old pharmacy, with walls thin enough to hear the lives of others, but too thick to keep her company. Since the age of 15, when he lost his father, and 2 years later his mother, loneliness had become as constant a presence as the kettle on the stove. He worked at Rosie's Diner, a small, weather-beaten restaurant, wedged between a hardware store and a laundromat. She woke up every day before the sun, tied her faded blue apron around her waist, and greeted customers with a smile that didn't say everything, but didn't lie either. His days were predictable, his nights silent, and his life suspended as if he were waiting for something he never knew how to name. Before the story continues, take the opportunity to subscribe to our channel. We always bring you real and transformative stories like this one, and you won't want to miss it. It was on a random Tuesday early in October that she saw him for the first time. A skinny boy with messy hair and a backpack bigger than him, he entered the restaurant and went straight to the last seat in the booth, furthest from the door. He didn't speak to anyone. He just sat down, got a glass of water and stayed there, quiet, looking at the world with a kind of attention that didn't judge, just absorbed. His eyes were too deep for his age, the eyes of someone who carried secrets he couldn't even name. Jenny noticed the way he looked at the customers' plates, always feigning disinterest, as if he didn't want to draw attention to himself. But his stomach gave it away. You could hear the rumblings of hunger even from meters away. Still, the boy never asked for anything other than water. Jenny didn't ask anything that day, or the next, or the next. There was something about that boy that demanded silence, and she respected that as one respects mourning, but she also knew the language of looks, and hunger has a very specific way of looking at a hot dish. Then, on Thursday morning, she accidentally got an order wrong. An extra plate of pancakes appeared on the counter. "Nobody likes cold food," she said quietly as she set the plate on the boy's table, as if she had deliberately left her keys behind. He hesitated, looked at her as if expecting a trap, and only after he saw her walk away without looking back did he begin to eat. And she ate it all, as if she had no right, but also no choice. From then on, it became a sort of secret ritual between the two. Jenny kept getting orders wrong with a curiously regular frequency, always close to the time the boy showed up. He, in turn, accepted the food as if it were a silent pact between two souls who understood, without words, what it was like to live with holes, in the stomach or in the heart. The more attentive customers began to notice. Some thought it was cute, others not so much. Comments began to arise, especially among the colleagues on the shift. "Don't you think you're spoiling this kid too much?" said one of the older waitresses with that tone that seemed concerned but carried judgment. The manager, a guy too practical to perceive tenderness, called Jenny aside and told her to stop excessively, but she just responded with a nod and continued serving. Not out of stubbornness. It was just that for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was doing something that really mattered. As the weeks passed, the boy became part of the Rosie's landscape, always the same place, always the same silence. Never a thank you, never a name. But Jenny didn't need that. She observed the small gestures, the care with which he arranged his cutlery after eating, the respectful way in which he folded his napkin, as if he were thanking someone without saying it. Sometimes, before leaving, he would leave a crumpled dollar under his plate, as if to show that it wasn't charity, that he was paying with the little he had. Jenny took the money and put it in an old box behind the counter. Never touched it. It wasn't about the value, it was about the gesture. It was as if the two maintained a fragile balance between dignity and need, between giving and receiving, but not everyone understood. One day, a customer took a photo of the boy with the plate in front of her and posted it on social media with the caption, "Does Rosie's now serve homeless people?" The post went viral, more than Jenny would have liked. Cruel comments sprang up like weeds. Some called it a farce, others an exaggeration, and some simply mocked the waitress for inventing charity. The manager, under pressure, talked about house politics, the restaurant's image, its reputation. He said that if this didn't stop, he would have to take action. Jenny listened to it all in silence, as she did when the world seemed too big. That night, she climbed the stairs to her apartment with heavy shoulders and an aching heart. She sat at the kitchen table, opened the old wooden box where she kept letters from her father, and read again the same line she had been reading since she was 15. No one becomes poor by sharing half the bread. And there, with the words worn out from being read so much, she decided she wasn't going to stop. Leave a like if this story is catching your attention. This helps us to continue bringing you content like this, which moves us inside. The next morning, Jenny arrived, earlier than usual. The floor was still wet from the previous night's cleaning, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with brewed coffee filled the room. She put on her apron more carefully than usual, as if wearing the blue cloth was some kind of armor. By the time the clock struck 6:50, she had already prepared the wrong dish for the day. Pancakes with butter and honey, the boy's favorite. But he didn't show up, not that day or the next. The cabin was empty, the glass of water untouched. Jenny checked her watch with disconcerting frequency, as if that would speed up the boy's return. Her classmates noticed, but no one said anything. It was as if even words had taken a break for the time being. Days turned into weeks, and over time, Jenny began to store the dishes in styrofoam containers, leaving them ready and warm, as if waiting for a guest who never arrives. It was a way of saying, "I'm still here." The manager began to lose his patience. He said he couldn't keep wasting food. Jenny didn't argue. He just started paying out of his own pocket. Every morning, the same ritual: arrive early, prepare the dish, leave it in the cabin. The food went home with her at the end of the day, but the gesture continued. Some people started to notice. A lady discreetly left a $5 bill on the counter to help with the boys' breakfast. Another brought a new pair of socks, saying they might be useful. Even without knowing his name, they began to refer to him as Jenny's little boy. It was little, but it was something, and for Jenny, that was enough. It was a cold Thursday with a white sky and a biting wind when everything changed. Jenny had just opened the restaurant when she heard the squeal of thick tires against the asphalt. It was a strange sound for that city, steady, precise, different from the tired cars that usually passed by. Within minutes, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of Rosie's. The tinted windows reflected the lights of the sign, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The older customers fell silent. The cook even turned off the stove. When the front door opened, a tall, rigid-looking man in an impeccable uniform walked in, a colonel by the insignia on his chest. He looked around, fixed Jenny's gaze, and walked straight to the counter. There was no arrogance in his steps, only urgency and weight. When he stopped in front of her, he gently removed his cap and said, "Miss Millers, on behalf of the United States Army, we thank you." The silence that followed seemed bigger than the restaurant itself. Jenny didn't understand. She blinked a few times, unsure if it was a misunderstanding. The colonel then continued, his voice breaking now. "His name is Adam Thompson, son of Sergeant Michael Thompson, who was killed in action last month. After his father died and his mother disappeared, Adam was left alone. The little money the sergeant managed to leave was used by the boy to survive, until he found this place. Until he found you." Jenny felt her legs weaken. It took a while for the realization to sink in. Adam, the silent boy, the one with the water and the pancakes, was the son of a soldier, an orphan boy, wandering aimlessly, sustained only by hope and small acts of kindness that, until then, seemed invisible to the rest of the world. Jenny couldn't speak. The words seemed stuck in her throat, as if any sound would break through what was happening there. The colonel pulled a thick envelope from his pocket. filled with neatly organized papers and black and white photographs. We found the sergeant's notes in his campaign diary. He worried daily about his son's whereabouts. There were no guarantees, no resources, but there was faith. And it was in that faith that he wrote something that brought us here. Then he opened the folded notebook and read aloud, "If I don't make it back, I hope someone sees Adam, really sees him, treats him humanely, feeds him as I would, protects him, even if they don't, know who he is." The words echoed through the restaurant like a prayer, and suddenly everything made sense. The boy's silence, the way he accepted each dish as if it were a sacred gift. Jenny had seen him. She had seen Adam as no one else had. The colonel placed a small wooden box with the army coat of arms carved on the lid on the counter. Inside it was a medal, a letter of thanks signed by officers, and a symbolic coin, a type of tribute reserved for civilian acts of bravery and humanity. Jenny didn't know what to make of it. "I didn't do anything wrong," he tried to say, almost in a whisper, but the colonel shook his head firmly. "You did everything that could be done. You saved a boy from abandonment, and more than that, you gave him dignity." Behind the counter, the cook was drying his eyes with a dish towel. The waitress, who had previously scoffed at the story, now kept her head down, visibly embarrassed. And for the first time in a long time, Rosie's diner was completely silent, not out of indifference, but out of reverence. In the days that followed, Rosie's diner is no longer just a roadside restaurant. The corner where Adam sat became a kind of silent altar. The bench now has a small brass plaque that reads, "Here sat someone who was seen." People from other cities started passing by just to ask about the story. Journalists tried to interview Jenny, but she refused every time. "I didn't want exposure or fame. I just served breakfast," he said. But those who frequented the place knew it was more than that. The routine has changed. The manager, previously strict and concerned about the appearance of the business, announced a new rule. Any child who came in and said he was hungry would eat. No charge, no questions asked, just food and hospitality. The wall next to the cash register began to display letters from soldiers, photos of military families, and messages of thanks. Some left coins, others little notes with words of encouragement. Jenny never saw Adam again. But one December morning, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a photo of the boy, now with his hair trimmed, wearing a school uniform and smiling genuinely. Behind the photo, a single sentence written in childish handwriting, "I never felt hungry again. Thank you." Jenny read and reread those words until she memorized every curve of the letter. He kept the photo in the same place where his father's letters used to be. And as much as she missed the complicit silence they shared, she felt peace. Not that illusory peace of resolved things, but the real peace, the one that comes when we do what was right, even when no one understands. The restaurant remained the same, worn stools, the smell of coffee, the simple dishes, but something essential had changed, as if the world, even just a little, had become a more decent place. In early January, the restaurant received a different kind of visitor. It wasn't a reporter, nor a new customer. It was a woman in her 40s, her hair tied in a hasty bun, her eyes looking tired for her age. She stood at the door for a few seconds, taking in the surroundings as if she were revisiting a place she didn't know. Jenny, even though she didn't recognize the face, felt something strange, a tension that didn't come from fear, but from something unresolved. The woman approached slowly, took a worn wallet out of her purse, and placed it on the counter. Was Adam's mother." The sentence came out brokenly, as if it were carrying stones inside. The restaurant fell silent, as if the place itself was holding its breath. Jenny didn't answer. She just looked into the woman's eyes and waited. She continued, in a tone that seemed to beg for forgiveness without knowing how. "I was wrong. I couldn't stay. I was scared, without structure, without a head. I ran away." Jenny didn't judge. "I never knew what it was like to be a mother, nor what goes on in the head of someone who sees everything falling apart." The Woman said that it was only after the military arrived that she decided to seek help. I was in a shelter trying to rebuild my life, giving statements, facing my own mistakes. He wanted to know what his son had been like during the days he was alone. Jenny said little. He told about the pancakes, the glasses of water, the silences. He didn't mention the rumors or the criticism. That didn't matter. Before leaving, the woman held Jenny's hand, her eyes brimming with tears, and said, "Thank you for being what I couldn't be." It was the first time Jenny cried because of Adam, not because of the pain he went through, but because of the greatness that could be contained in such a small gesture. A plate of pancakes, a daily choice not to turn your face away. In the following weeks, Jenny returned to her routine, but something inside her was no longer the same. The business at Rosie's grew, and with it, the variety of stories she began to hear. A truck driver told about the daughter he hadn't seen for years. A lady left a letter saying she had lost her grandson to depression. A teenager left a bag of used toys for the next boy who sits here. Adam's chair became more than just a seat. It became a place of memory, of hope, of reunion. And without meaning to, Jenny had created a space where people felt seen, even if they didn't say a word. The girl who was previously invisible in her own city was now called by name on every street corner. Not with fame, but with recognition. A wave, a smile, a thank you for everything you did. She welcomed everyone with simplicity, as if she had simply done what was right, in the simplest way she knew how. One day, when she got home after work, she found a brown envelope under her door. No return address, no stamp, just her name handwritten in firm handwriting. Inside was a letter from the colonel. He said that thanks to the repercussions of the case, it was possible to speed up the creation of an emergency fund aimed at abandoned children with military parents. The fund would be named after Adam Thompson, and Jenny had been named an honorary advisor to the program. She didn't have to accept it, he said, but they wanted her to know how much her actions had changed lives beyond the one she already knew. Along with the letter was a smaller medal, this time engraved with a simple phrase, "Seeing is the first step to saving." Jenny held the medal for minutes, in silence, and at that moment she knew that, even without leaving the city, she had gone further than she ever imagined. Over time, Rosie's became not just a restaurant, but a meeting place for stories like Adam's. Other children came, other faces hungry for affection and food. Jenny learned to identify each one by their eyes, the look she knew so well, because it had once been hers. The manager, once a skeptic, became the biggest advocate for the empty chair program, as he called the restaurant's new policy. It was no longer about profit, it was about making a difference, and that was reflected in the environment. Customers left bigger tips, brought donations, shared stories. The little box where Jenny had once kept the boys' dollars was now overflowing. The money was used for meals, clothes, even bus tickets for those who needed to start over somewhere else. It had started with a plate of pancakes, and now it was almost a dignified cafeteria. Jenny, however, was not putting herself at the center of anything. She continued to sweep the floor, wash dishes, and take orders as she always did. But there was a new calm in her manner. Sometimes she would sit on Adam's bench during the final minutes of her shift, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out the window as if waiting for someone, even though she knew he might not return. It was her way of keeping the boy close. One such afternoon, a little girl came in alone, carrying a backpack almost as big as her own. She looked at Jenny, then at the bench at the back of the room. Jenny understood. She had ordered the wrong thing on purpose, pancakes with honey, and when she set the plate down, the little girl looked at her and whispered, "Thank you." This wasn't just a hungry child, this was another soul being seen. And in that moment, Jenny knew that Adam's story wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The following months brought more visits, more letters, and even some public tributes. Jenny even received invitations to tell her story at charity events, but she turned them all down. She said she didn't know how to give a speech. She could only serve coffee and listen in silence. His story, however, continued to spread, not through the internet, but through the mouths and hearts of people who passed by. A couple left a generous donation to expand the space and build a small wing at the back, corner of hope. It was a simple room, with shelves full of children's books, board games, and a wall with photos of children who had passed through there. In the center, a frame with Adam's image, the same one from the photo sent months earlier, and a phrase chosen by Jenny: "He asked for nothing, and he got everything." It wasn't a memorial. It was a reminder. Even with everything growing around her, Jenny maintained a routine almost identical to before. I arrived early, prepared coffee, checked the cutlery. The difference was that now, every time someone walked into the restaurant, she looked them in the eye. For real. He learned that each person carries some hunger for affection, for attention, for care. And sometimes a warm plate of food was all it took to start healing. One spring morning, while wiping down the empty tables before opening, he found on top of one of them a small letter folded with a red ribbon. There was no name, just 2 lines written in blue pen. "You saved more than you know. Keep watching." Jenny smiled to herself. I didn't need to know who I had left, because deep down, that phrase summed up everything she had learned. Seeing someone, for real, can change destinies. And hers was changed just like that. Comment below what you would do in Jenny's place. We read everything, and stories like this deserve to be discussed. On the 1-year anniversary of the last time she had seen Adam, Jenny had prepared the restaurant with special care. She didn't tell anyone, but she left fresh flowers in the booth where he usually sat. She organized the bookshelf in the Hope corner, and she handwrote a little note that she placed next to the day's pancakes. "You are seen. You matter." Maybe he would never show up again. Maybe he would never see it. But it wasn't about that. It was about keeping alive the gesture, the purpose, the promise that had been born from the silence of a boy and the attention of a waitress who never wanted to be a heroine. The town remembered it too. Some customers commented, others left candy, books, even small toys on Adam's table. The whole restaurant seemed to breathe gratitude that day, as if it had grown its own heart. At the end of the day, Jenny turned off the lights and sat for a moment in her booth. She ran her fingers slowly along the edge of the table, taking a deep breath. She didn't feel sad or nostalgic. She felt whole. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had left something in the world, and it wasn't some grand mark or some heroic deed. It was just a quiet current of care that kept growing, even though she couldn't control it. Before she left, she took one last look at the painting on the wall. Adam was smiling with that same restrained gleam in his eyes, and Jenny thought about how he might never know how much he had saved her too, because while she fed him pancakes, he fed her with purpose. Outside, night fell serenely over the small Kansas town. The lights at Rosie's still glowed dimly but steadily. Those who passed by might have just seen a simple restaurant like so many others. But for those who knew the story, this was a place where important things happened, without fanfare, without headlines, without shouting. Things made of presence, of empathy, of the courage to not turn one's face away. Jenny never received any awards. She was never on the cover of anything, but her name, engraved on the bottom of the letters, on the donation forms, in the accounts of those who passed by, echoed as a synonym for humanity. And so her life went on, simple, discreet, but marked by something that no amount of forgetting could erase. She continued serving. Coffee, pancakes, and kindness. She continued caring, listening, and seeing people like no one else could. And when someone new sat in the booth at the back, no matter who it was, Jenny already knew what to do. She would prepare the wrong order, place the plate in front of them with a slight smile and say, without saying, "You're safe here," because she had learned from Adam, from life, from pain, and from the choice to continue, that small gestures, when persistent, are the ones that transform the most. And in that forgotten restaurant in the Kansas countryside, the world became, every day, a little more just, one plate at a time. If this story touched you in any way, share it with someone. Sometimes a simple story can be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.